Hi guys, we've had quite a few requests recently for how to properly clean a FLIT-16. So this is a quick video just to run you through the basic steps. The first thing you're going to want to do is to remove the battery. So we'll take the seat post out as normal and remove the battery from the frame. Then we're going to put the seat post back in to prevent any unwanted water getting inside the frame. The next thing to be aware of is the points on the frame where you don't want too much water to get into. Now, all of the parts of the bike are rated to be waterproof, but they're not rated to be submerged in water or to be subjected to high pressure spraying. So never use something like a jet washer to clean a bike. The bits you want to make sure don't get completely submerged in water are things like your display, the point where the cables enter the frame here. You'll want to make sure the battery charge port is properly closed. And the final one is where the torque sensor cable runs into the frame down by the bottom bracket. For this video, we're just going to show you a basic way to clean the bike using things you can commonly find around the house. So all we need is a bucket full of warm water and washing up liquid. And all we're going to do is add the washing up liquid to the water. This just helps remove any grease on the bike frame itself, and we'll mix that up. Next, we're going to clean the frame itself. So I usually use two sponges, one bigger, cleaner one for cleaning things like the frame and the wheels and so on, and a second, smaller sponge for doing really nasty, greasy bits like the chain. So we'll start off with the big sponge first, and really simply get it nice and wet, lots of soap suds. I usually start at the front, give everything pretty thorough clean. We'll rinse it all off later, so it doesn't really matter too much how much you get on there. We're just trying to remove any marks, and then I work my way back. Come all the way down the front. We can get this all the way around the forks. Continue working our way back, occasionally cleaning out. While we're going over the bike with a big frame and wheel sponge, the only bit we're going to avoid is the chain and all of the bits that it touches, because those are by far the muckiest part of the bike, and we'll be cleaning them with a separate sponge later. Once we've thoroughly gone over the frame on both sides, the next thing is to clean the wheels. So again, we just want a nice wet sponge, and we're looking at cleaning the whole wheel, but particularly this silvery surface here. This is the braking surface, so the cleaner it is, the better your brakes will work. So just go around the whole wheel, like so. Make sure you rotate it to get the bit hidden behind the fork, and then really thoroughly clean off that braking surface, bringing the wheel all the way around. If you've got mud guards, we might as well clean those while we're here as well. So just give them a quick rub down with the sponge, and you can get underneath it as well. For fiddly little bits, like in the suspension here, we can just use any kind of brush. I often just use an old toothbrush. So again, just get that nice and soapy, and really just work away at those parts you couldn't reach with your bigger sponge. We're just trying to loosen everything up and get lots of soap on any grease in there, so that it will rinse off easily later. If you want to do a really deep clean, there may be some parts of the frame that are hard to reach even with a small brush like a toothbrush. And those will be parts like down here on the rear swing arm near the rear wheel. Now, it's not really necessary to clean those parts, and they get pretty dirty quickly anyway, but if you want to access them, you may need to remove your rear wheel. If you've been riding in mucky conditions, some of you might notice that your seat post feels a bit gritty when you're pushing it up and down as well. So we've got a way to clean that pretty simply too. First of all, just take out the seat post. And all you'll need is a bit of paper towel. So just clean the seat post itself off first. And then all you're going to do is simply bunch up the paper towel into a wad. And then you want to put it into the lower section of the seat post tube through the back of the bike. And then with the seat post clamp open, just ram that all the way through. So each time you do that, it'll pick up quite a bit of muck, and you want to do that a few times and the seat post will go up and down a lot smoother. One part you might want to check in particular is your frame clamps. That's because if they get grit in them, they can become sticky over time. So to check those, all we'll do is loosen them off. And in fact, you're going to loosen them all the way off so they come out. Be careful because there's a spring in there that you don't want to lose. So when you take them off, you've got the clamp itself and that spring there. And then you can again just use the toothbrush to clean the clamping surfaces and to clean the clamp itself. So once the clamp is nice and clean, all you want to do is dry the inside surface with a bit of paper towel from the kitchen. We'll reassemble it. So the first thing you need is the bolt, clamp goes on there, and then the spring goes on the inside, and that's ready to go back on the frame. So before we put the clamp back on the frame, we're just again going to use a bit of kitchen towel and just make sure those inside surfaces are nice and dry so we don't trap any water in there. Then we'll take the clamp assembly and screw that back in place. Ready to be tightened all the way back on the frame. So now that we've washed the whole frame and the wheels, but not yet done the chain, the next thing we need to do is just rinse everything off. So you can use a regular garden hose. Just make sure it's not something high pressure. Okay, so now that we've finished with the bike itself, we can move on to the chain. Now we're going to clean not only the chain, but also all the bits it touches. And that includes 4 little cogs that are called jockey wheels. One is here, one is here, one is under here, and one is on the motor itself. Also, we're going to use a different sponge because the chain gets really dirty. So what we're going to do first is, by moving the chain backwards, we can move all the parts. So we just want to clean these wheels while moving this chain backwards. So just get the sponge, press it against each of the wheels as it rotates backwards. You ideally want to do both sides of these little wheels until they're nice and clean. Okay, now that the jockey wheels are clean, we'll clean the chain itself. And it's very similar. We just want to hold a nice soapy sponge against the chain and pass the chain through the sponge by rotating the pedals backwards. And you'll want to keep doing that until the chain itself is nice and clean and you've got all the grit out of it. You may need to do this multiple times, cleaning the sponge as you go. Okay, once we've washed our chain thoroughly, we need to dry it before reapplying a chain lubricant to it to ensure that it continues to run smoothly. So all you'll need is some sort of rag or a piece of kitchen towel, and just as before, you want to run the chain through it, but this time you're just trying to get all the water off. So run it through a couple of times until it's reasonably dry, and then you're ready to apply the lubricant. Okay, so once your chain is dry, we can apply chain lubricant. There are a number of different chain lubricants on the market. It gets a little bit confusing. You can always just ask at your local bike shop. Generally, we recommend people in the UK use a wet lubricant because it works well in all conditions. If you live in a very dry environment, you can use what's called a dry lubricant as well. It's more waxy. So all you need to do is apply the lubricant, ideally to each individual joint on the chain. Although sometimes, to be a bit quicker, I just let the lube run and then run the chain through it. Okay, now that we've applied the lubricant to the whole chain, we want to leave it for about 5 minutes just to let it work its way in between all the joints on the chain. And then the final step is similar to when we were washing it and drying it earlier. Just want to take a cloth or a rag, preferably a clean one, and just run the chain through it. The purpose of this is to remove any excess lube that is sitting on the surface of the chain. If it's sitting on the surface, it's not helping to lubricate the chain joints. All it's doing is sitting there and attracting dirt into it. So it can actually make your chain more gritty if you have too much lubricant on there. So the lubricant should be acting on the joints inside, but anything on the surface, we ideally want to remove. Okay, now that your bike's nice and clean, all you need to do next is just to leave it to dry as thoroughly as you can, and then finally reinstall your battery and you're good to go. So we've shown you how to clean the bike with really basic things that you'll have lying around the house. There are also some more specialist things you can get. So there are a number of specialist bike cleaning products and also various brushes of different size that help you to get into some of the difficult to reach places. Everyone has different preferences, so have a look, see what's out there, see what makes it easier for you. And then the other thing is, once the bike is clean, just as we re-lube the chain, there are also various greases and oils that we can use to ensure that any moving parts continue to work well. Okay, so we've shown you how to do the basic clean on the chain. If you want to give it a really thorough clean, there are a few different ways to do it. You can use a specialist bike chain cleaning tool, which wraps around the chain and you rotate the chain through it. Those are available from most bike shops. Or you can also use a degreaser. So it's best to use a bike-specific degreaser, but you can also use a general purpose one. The most important thing is you don't want to get the degreaser into any moving parts on the bike apart from the chain. So for example, you don't want to get it into any of your hubs or anywhere else that needs to be greased long term. We're just trying to remove the muck from the chain itself. To apply the degreaser, give it a shake, and then pick a spot on the frame where you're not going to inadvertently spray the degreaser into anything in the background. So I usually like to do it against this plate on the chain tensioner, and you just want to spray the degreaser while rotating the chain backwards. Once you've gone through a full rotation of the chain and just made sure that the whole chain is covered, you want to leave it for about 5 to 10 minutes so that it can act to remove the grease. Okay, so now the degreaser has had 5 to 10 minutes to work its way through the grease on the chain itself. We need to clean it off really thoroughly. This is very important because afterwards we're going to re-lube the chain, and if there's any degreaser left on the chain, it will just break down the lubricant you apply and you'll be back to square one. So for this, you want to use a lot of liquid. So make sure your sponge is nice and wet and really bring the chain through, cleaning the sponge off multiple times to get all the degreaser off. Okay, now all the degreaser has been thoroughly rinsed off the chain, we can reapply lube to the chain as we did previously in the video. One of the things you can use to ensure that your bike continues to work well in the future is bike grease. You can pick this up from any bike shop. There are quite a few different varieties. They all do roughly the same job. And all we're going to use it for today is to apply some grease to the frame clamps. So all you'll need to do is take a tiny amount of grease just on the tip of your finger, and then taking the frame clamp, we're just going to apply it to the inside of the jaw where it makes contact with the frame. So there and there, and then that is ready to be assembled back as a clamp and returned to the bicycle. Another product you can use to keep everything moving properly is a light bike oil. This is usually a little bit lighter than the types of lube that are used to lubricate chains. And you just essentially want to apply it to any moving parts. So typically these are things like the pivot points on any brakes. So you'll just apply a little dab of it. The idea is that it works its way into the joint itself. So on this rear brake, I'll just pick out the points that are moving, let that work its way in, and then wipe off any excess afterwards.